Hello, welcome everybody. When Tim and I were deciding who would do the uh, presentations or whatever for each of the movies, I kind of called dibs on The Shawshank Redemption because it's one of my all-time favorite films. In fact, when I'm a person who teaches film, and so I get asked the question, "What's your favorite film?" all the time, and I almost always say The Shawshank Redemption. I really love movies about friendship, and this film is really the theme is friendship at the middle of it. And I'm just going to name off a bunch of films about friendship. The first one that comes to mind is Stand By Me, which I think is notable because it was also written by Stephen King. So, apparently he thinks that's an important theme as well. And that movie was directed by the famous Rob Reiner, the late Rob Reiner. Another one of my favorite films of all times is the French film The Untouchables. It's about this unlikely friendship, a lot like in The Shawshank Redemption. Red and Andy are so very different, and yet they have this bond, this friendship that is great. But I don't know, even animated films like Toy Story have it, and The Sandlot, and I Love You Man. So there are a lot of great comedies with friendships. Dead Poet Society, which I love. Bridesmaids, E.T., Big, Fried Green Tomatoes. Another foreign film, Cinema Paradiso. I love that film from Italy. Um, Sideways, The Big Chill, Super Bad, another comedy, Thelma and Louise, A League of Their Own. So there are so many great movies about friendship, and I just love this. And The Shawshank is one of my favorite. Not a comedy, although there maybe a couple times I do laugh, but it is a very serious, intense film. But the friendship at the center of it, I think, is important. The other thing I wanted to talk about is how we classified the films. We've been saying genres like uh, film noir or combat or war films or rom-coms or dramas. This one is kind of unique. I feel, and I think Tim does too, that character development is leaving films a bit. There's more emphasis on plot and on special effects and the action, and less about really getting to know the characters. At the end of Shawshank Redemption, you really know Red and Andy. In fact, Andy's kind of a closed book, and yet by the end of this film, because of all the character development, you really kind of know his personality. And I feel like that in some ways is leaving us. Not entirely. There's still great films that have really good character development, but as a whole, there's less of it, and I think it's a shame. I wish there was more of that in films. Let me see. Let's talk. I mentioned Stephen King. Frank Darabont. I got to tell you this. Stephen King is so cool in some ways. He writes a lot of short stories in addition to his novels, and he has this thing for aspiring filmmakers. If you want to make a film about one of his short stories, he'll license it to you for just $1. In fact, I don't know, 5, 8 years ago, I did that. I had a student of mine who wanted to act in one of this Stephen King short story. And so I wrote to him, got the license for just $1, and then we had a calendar year, and the student was not able to do it. So I didn't actually get to go through with it, but he has this deal, which I think is very generous, and I think that's great. And so Frank Darabont did that. He licensed one of his short stories and made a film of it, and they became friends. And so he was very interested in Stephen King's novella, the Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. And so he asked King if he could write a screenplay, and he did. And then when he was done, he wrote it, and I think it was just like 8 weeks, really fast. He showed it to some people, and everyone was interested. And I mentioned Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner loved the screenplay so much that he offered him $2.5 million for the rights to the screenplay, but Frank Darabont wouldn't accept. It was kind of a rocky moment in that he wrote it for himself to direct. Rocky, Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky for himself to act in. There's a new movie about that coming out, by the way. So he, fought for the rights to make his own movie, and there was all kinds of interesting notes about it. You can read them. He originally was going to cast Tom Hanks as Andy, but because Tom Hanks was unavailable because he was shooting Forrest Gump, he had to go to other actors and look. By the way, Brad Pitt was originally cast, not as that. It was one of the smaller characters and then couldn't do it as well. But very interesting. I love how they shot on location. They found a real abandoned prison in Ohio. It was so kind of run down, they had to go in and do some renovations. So all the exteriors and only some limited interiors were shot in the prison, and then in the studio they built some of the interiors to shoot those things. But the fact that they shot at a real prison yard, I thought was gave it some authenticity. You had to really believe that these people were in prison and suffering, and I thought that was great. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this year, I think 1994 might be one of the best years of film of all time. As great as Shawshank is, and I have to tell you that Shawshank Redemption has the highest IMDb score I know of. I mean, there might be something higher, and sometimes when movies first come out, they're high and then they drop down. But right now on IMDb, it has a 9.3 user rating. That means that's really, really high. When you see a movie in the eights, it's really high, and to be in the nines, that's amazing. And it has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. So people love it. People who watch it think it's a great film. But as great as it was, it didn't win any Academy Awards, because 1994 also had films like Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece. I think many people argue that it's his best film. It was also nominated, but Forrest Gump, I don't know off the top of my head, I think it won something like 11 Academy Awards. So it was Shawshank was in direct competition with these other great films. But the test of time, I would argue that the Shawshank Redemption is seen more fondly, judged higher than the films that won the Academy Awards. And as Tim will point out all the time, the Academy often gets it wrong. That movies that are popular that year or seen to be great that year, after a few years or longer, their history does not always judge the judges well, so to speak. So anyways, I don't know, some other things I wanted to mention. First of all, Frank Darabont's screenplay was so great. As I said, so many people wanted it, including Rob Reiner. And the studio basically said, we like it so much that here's your budget, we'll leave you alone. A lot of times the studio wants changes to the screenplay, changes to casting. They'll want to make changes. They want to control. And Frank Darabont really had kind of the free reign to do whatever he wanted. The studio only had one note, and they were pretty adamant about it. The original screenplay had Red get on the bus, and he gave that hope speech. All I have is hope, and I hope to see my friend. If you remember, that scene's in the movie. But that's where Frank Darabont wanted to end the movie. the studio said, no, no, they need to be on the beaches of Zihuatanejo. And so he forced them to shoot, or the studio forced Darabont to shoot it. And Darabont thought, okay, I'll shoot it and just not put it in the movie. But when he saw it, especially when he showed it to some test audiences, they loved it. I think it's a great way where there's no dialogue. We just see the two of them walking together, and you know that their friendship's going to live on in this, spectacularly beautiful place. So they get their redemption. They're going to, Andy's going to get to live the life that he deserved. I don't know. I just think it's a wonderful movie. I want to know my favorite composer, Thomas Newman, was nominated for Best Original Score. I think the music is incredible. So if you haven't watched the film yet, or you're going to watch it a second time for this, or you've seen it before and you're going to watch it again, pay attention to the score because I think it's incredibly powerful. It was nominated for Best Cinematography. Think of the moving camera work, the way it flies around there's a drone shot flying around the yard, and the slow movement. And, I just think that the cinematography's incredibly good and powerful. It was nominated for Best Editing. And think about the way the story is told, where we are surprised that Andy's not in his room, and then we discover later, it becomes almost a mystery where he went, and then we discover where he went. All that is done with kind of clever editing. So many amazing things about the film. I want to know what you liked, or if you're one of those very, very few people, what is it that you didn't like? Don't be too strong, because it is my favorite film, and I won't respond too fondly with a lot of negative criticism. But anyways, tell me what you liked. The acting, the story, the set design, the theme of friendship, or whatever. I think it's a great film, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, and I'm eager to read what you have to say about it. So thank you.